Did you ever hear the tragedy of Battlefront the Wise?
No.
I thought not. It's not a story EA would tell you. It's a gaming legend. Battlefront was a legend of gaming culture. So powerful and so wise, it could use the Force to influence the children to buy it.
What happened to him?
Battlefront became so powerful. The only thing it was afraid of was losing its power, which eventually, of course, it did. Unfortunately, it got greedy, forcing loot crates down its players' throats. Then, his fanbase killed him in reviews on release. Ironic. It could save others from obscurity, but not itself.
Is it possible to learn this power?
Not from EA.
It was the early 2000s, third grade for me, and the new Star Wars movies were coming out. My dad was absolutely thrilled about it. He was a massive Star Wars fan and had gotten me Star Wars Legos and action figures for every present. I loved those things. The Star Wars universe was so vast and full of wonder, especially for a kid. But amid all the Star Wars movies, one thing stood out: the battles. They were always so intense, with clones and droids going head to head, clashing in crazy set pieces on foreign planets, undiscovered worlds. I think it appealed to everyone's natural inclination to explore the unknown and the glory of combat. So it was no surprise that when a new game was released in 2004, it would be an instant hit: Star Wars Battlefront I. I remember begging my dad to take me to the store and buy it for my Xbox. I could hardly wait to boot it up. It was an incredible experience. The maps were authentically Star Wars, featuring many iconic locations from the first Star Wars movies, like Yavin 4, the plains of Naboo, Endor, Bespin, and my all-time favorite, Hoth. The sounds were authentically Star Wars, with recognizable characters such as rebel soldiers, elite Imperial troops, and specialized sniper units. There were also cool Star Wars vehicles that would respawn periodically that you could get in and play with. You could even pilot the AT-AT, a massive Imperial ground attack unit. To counter that, you could hop in a snowspeeder, use the grappling hooks to destroy them, or get into turrets and obliterate them with focus fire around the neck. The main game style was to capture various objectives throughout the map, or eliminate all the enemy reinforcements. The bots were mixed with real players, which gave you a feeling of being the main character, even in multiplayer. If you weren't a very skilled player, it was nice because you'd often go against cannon fodder for most of the match. I really liked this because at certain points when I didn't have internet access, I could play with the AI on multiplayer maps without needing a connection, allowing me to enjoy the multiplayer experience without having connection. Every now and then you would go head to head against another player, and engaging in intense combat would give you a satisfying rush of dopamine when you took them out. There were also heroes roving the map, unplayable by players. They were legendary Star Wars characters who couldn't be killed, and it was terrifying when one of them would lock onto you. But that didn't stop players from being creative and stopping these forces of nature. You could blow them off the map or lead them into a monster pit, which was incredibly satisfying. The game also came with 2 Galactic Conquest campaigns, one for the Clone Wars and another for Galactic Civil War. You'd play against AI, both fighting over planets, and the winner of the planet would get certain bonuses for the next battle they played. Overall, Battlefront I did grand Star Wars battles justice. It had enough to keep players engaged for hours, but not too much to be overwhelming. It got things right. The very next year, they did it again with the absolute banger, Battlefront II. Battlefront II took what was loved from the first Battlefront and improved massively upon them, adding a more complex campaign that put you in the shoes of the 501st as you trekked through Order 66 and snuffed out the Jedi terrorist. It was heart-wrenching as Commander Cody spoke about how they knew about Order 66 and how no one spoke a word as it was happening.
Perhaps, but no one said a word. Not on the flight to Coruscant, not when Order 66 came down, and not when we marched into the Jedi Temple. Not a word.
damn, it was intense. The Galactic Conquest was pretty simple, but it added some cool new features, like space battles and some turn-based conquests to prioritize making fleets and garrisoning planets. It was by no means easy though, as the game made the AI team significantly more potent than allied units, leading to very close games, where the player would have to clutch it in the end. A lot of times it felt like the scene in Black Hawk Down when the helicopter was being overrun and you just fight through hordes of enemies. Multiplayer also introduced some really cool new classes, each having its own playstyle. As a droidy car, you'd have to be strategic with activating your shield and placing where you wanted to go, as players could easily get behind you. There was a clone commander who had a minigun that needed to spool up and recharge, leading to some very interesting engagements. Not to mention, you could enlist a squad of 4 AI to follow you around the map. The space battles were also a ton of fun, as you could either fly around and destroy enemy ships, or stage a landing into the enemy ship, fighting through waves of pilots to disable some of their critical systems and win the match. Overall, the entire appeal behind the first Battlefront games was that they put you in the eyes of the hero. You are the main character. The game hinges on your skill, your ability to turn the tide of the battles, complete objectives. It's not uncommon to rack up over 100 kills against the AI, occasionally running into another player, which would lead to heart-pounding combat. The guns, ships, heroes, and characters were all authentic Star Wars, and the game rewards you for skill. The more kills you get and the more lethal you are, the better access you have to overpowered heroes and classes. Meanwhile, the AI is just mashing each other in a hamburger hill of carnage. The AI aren't massively good shots either, so some engagements would just look insane with hundreds of blaster rounds all being fired around you, all the while you're just kind of returning fire with some well-placed shots. God, these games were fun. Everyone was dying for Battlefront III, especially as the months turned into years and the years turned into a decade. Imagine how cool it would be to have classic Battlefront on the Unreal gaming engine with all the cutting-edge technology offered today. Lightsabers cutting off limbs, massive pulse lasers blowing characters up. I mean, it wouldn't be the most kid-friendly game, but that wouldn't matter. It would satisfy all of our wants and needs to be a play a fun Star Wars game. And then, just like that, Star Wars Battlefront was set to release exactly 10 years later. Disney had bought Star Wars and breathed some life into the franchise that had been silent for years. I was so pumped. I remember reading as much as I could online about the game, watching any video I could find. I was apprehensive that Disney would ruin Star Wars because, well, it's a family movie kind of studio, or, they make kids stuff. Whereas Star Wars has always been more brutal and had weight.
Hang on, kid. This may smell bad, kid.
The videos started to drop, and oh my, the game looked like a masterpiece. And then it was released. 2015 Battlefront merely shared the name of the early 2000 versions. Aside from that, this game was no Battlefront. And that hurts because I love Star Wars and I love Battlefront. I wanted this game to be everything from the originals and more. But simply put, it wasn't. They did away with the AI in multiplayer games, making the engagements much more difficult. In the old games, you were him. The AI was there for your amusement, to abuse and mow through battle after battle. In the new games, they completely flipped the skill gap on its head, and that's just not what Battlefront was known for. Sure, they had massive battles and vehicles, but they took out the space battles and the campaign. The game was gorgeous, and although parts were fun, it was overall disjointed and left a lot to be desired. Instead of classes, players could customize what ability cards and weapons, skins they wanted for their character. But I remember during my playthrough, I pre-ordered the deluxe edition because, again, I was a Battlefront simp and got access to the best gun in the game right off the bat, Han Solo's blaster. This thing schmacked from day one, and there was really no need to use any other gun. So I just saved up credits I earned in multiplayer to buy the most expensive skin and upgrade my cars. There just wasn't that much to customize, and instead of playing and having to think about what situation for what class I needed would best fit the engagement and the map, it became apparent that a boost pack, grenade launcher, and any interchangeable perk was the game's meta, as you could close any distance with a jetpack, then melt the players with your Han Solo blaster. Run out of charge in your blaster? No worries. Just lob your grenades over there and watch them be obliterated. Now don't get me wrong, I did enjoy this game. It was Star Wars and a beautifully crafted game with fun game modes and maps, but it wasn't authentic Battlefront. It wasn't the game I fell in love with as a kid. To be honest, it was just a not very done well Battlefield game with a Star Wars skin. At least in Battlefield, you can customize weapons, and there's some diversity rather than just making the best gun in the game unlocked at the final level, or instantly accessible to those who shell out more cash. You think maybe that's some foreshadowing? Well, I can tell you firsthand it was, as we step into the clusterfuck that was Battlefront II. When Battlefront II was released, I immediately threw $60 at it. I didn't feel the need to get the deluxe edition, because at this point, after playing the first one, I figured there wouldn't be much content here, and I would get bored. Little did I know, I would come to regret buying the game altogether, as it was a complete fucking scam. Let's start with the campaign. It sucked in Disney fashion. It was poorly written with multiple levels having objectives that didn't even make sense logically. Like you had to free an Imperial ship by shooting the locks on it while it was docked at an Imperial station. Like, why not just call up the homies and be like, yo, release the ship? There was also a ton of cringe throughout the game with the classic empowered female good to bad guy arc, and it put a massively sour taste in my mouth, which wasn't really helping with my already pissed off mood of how the poorly written Star Wars universe was shaping up to be. Move on to the multiplayer, and holy fuck, what a travesty. There was only one class worth playing, the Heavy, because it came with 200 base health and a shield. With the already congested maps, it made no sense to play anything else but the Heavy. As the Scout or the other classes, they were glass cannons with 100 base health. It didn't even make up for it with them having quick time to kill guns. Now, you may be saying, okay, I can deal with that if there's an actual progression system based on skill that eventually will allow me to be good with these glass cannon classes in the end, right? Wrong. The entire progression system was based on loot crates that would randomly drop ability cards for classes you didn't even specialize in. The whole system was made intentionally grindy. The only way you could earn access to the progression system was by either spending real money for the currency or to get the packs by playing an obscene amount of games. By the way, it didn't reward you based on how many kills you got or how many objectives you captured, but by how long you were physically in the game. That's right, by how long characters were present in the lobby. That's how you got XP, which led to AFK XP farming. Maybe they did this because the game was so janky on launch, it was actually hard to stay in a lobby to completion, as the game would frequently crash, losing all your progress you had completed in that lobby. I mean, fuck, how did they think this would be okay? And they made all the heroes complete glass cannons, meaning you weren't him if you played as one. You were just maybe slightly better in some certain scenarios, where you figured out how to hide well and parry. It was so bad that EA paused all microtransactions as they figured out how to actually make the game not complete dog shit, which, to their credit, they did. They would end up adding a coherent rank up system. They would take out all the microtransactions, and they would continuously update the game over the next few years in penance for absolutely skull-fucking the Battlefront legacy. The game now is pretty fun, multiplayer-wise, and it has a lot of good maps with better balance overall, but the scars of the release have persisted, as depending on the time of day you play, it's hard to find a match. especially if you want to play something that isn't whatever the trending game mode is of that day. All that being said, it's sad because there's a massive demand for a good Star Wars game, and being they put so much effort into making visually stunning maps, authentic Star Wars characters and sounds, it was all tarnished by greed. And although it's not a Battlefront like the old days, it does feel a lot more like one, as they even added back the AI. Let's just hope that if there is a Battlefront 3, they take the lessons they learned and apply them to that game. A game that will have a cleaner reputation and hopefully finally bring together all the greatness of the Battlefront releases in the past. Anyway guys, that's the tragedy of Battlefront. It started as a humble game boasting really fun and simple massive battles that digressed into a plastic money grab of its former self. In an attempt to save its name, they put a lot of work into making it a fun game, which it arguably is now. But it took far too long, and to get there, it dragged the reputation of the game through the mud in the process. And that's it guys. Until the next one, take it easy.